The radio burst to life with a voice so strained it sounded like it was being dragged through gravel. "We're surrounded. They're closing in from every side. We can't hold." Then the signal broke, swallowed by static, and the last words hung in the air like a question that refused to end. 350 Rangers, cornered, trapped, outnumbered, and above the valley, a helicopter's rotor blades tore through the night sky as if the wind itself was trying to escape. Captain Mara Kline sat in the cockpit, her hands steady, her breath shallow. She had been trained to follow orders. She'd been taught that rules were the only thing standing between discipline and chaos. But discipline doesn't always save lives. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. The command came through with the cold certainty of a judge's verdict. Do not engage. Do not attempt rescue. Return to base. Mara's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked to the map, to the red dot marking the Rangers' position deep inside a narrow canyon where enemy fire could not only reach them, but pin them down like insects under a boot. She could almost see them, even from above. Bodies crouched behind rocks. Faces smeared with sweat and dust, hands shaking, weapons trembling as the bullets screamed past. Mara remembered the first time she'd heard the phrase, "no one left behind." She'd been a young pilot then, still believing the world was fair. She'd watched men die because someone in a safer room decided the risk wasn't worth it. Now, the same choice sat in front of her. Obey orders and leave them to die. Or defy orders and risk everything. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Harris, glanced at her. His eyes were wide, his lips tight. "Captain, we can't. They'll court-martial us." Mara cut him off with a quiet intensity that didn't leave room for argument. "If we don't go, they die." He looked away, but he didn't argue. The moral tension was a knife between them, sharp, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. The helicopter banked toward the canyon. The wind howled. Dust rose in a thick, choking curtain. The world below was a landscape of shadows and danger, and the enemy saw them. Bullets tore into the air. The helicopter shuddered, rocked like a ship in a storm. The alarm screamed, and for a moment, Mara felt the same fear she had felt as a child when she first learned the world could be cruel. But she kept flying. She flew lower. The canyon walls rose like a cage. The enemy fire intensified, a relentless torrent. And the helicopter dipped, then climbed, then dipped again, like a wounded bird fighting to stay alive. Below, the Rangers shouted, their voices carried up through the smoke and chaos. "We're going down. We're going down." Mara's heart clenched. She had never felt so small and so powerful at the same time. The decision came in a heartbeat. She would land. The helicopter touched down with a violence that threw sand into every corner of the cockpit. The ground shook. The air was thick with dust. The smell of burning fuel and hot metal filled the cabin. Mira's hands were steady, but her heart was not. She opened the door. The noise outside was deafening. Bullets punched the air. The Rangers surged forward, a tide of desperate men moving toward the only hope they had left. Mara stepped out into the storm of gunfire, her body trembling, her mind screaming. She helped the first Ranger climb in. His hands were raw, his eyes wide with disbelief. He just held onto her like she was the last anchor in a sea of chaos. Then another, then another, then another. The helicopter filled. It became a vessel of salvation, packed with men who had been told they were trapped. And then came the moment that changed everything. The enemy moved in, a wave of fighters pushing toward the helicopter like a tide of shadows. Mara could see the canyon narrowing, the escape route closing. She could leave. She could fly away. She could survive. But she stayed. She fired the helicopter's defensive weapons, drawing the enemy's attention. She maneuvered the craft like a dancer in a storm, each movement precise, each breath calculated. The Rangers inside screamed not in panic but in relief because they knew somehow that she was not leaving them. The helicopter lifted off, rising through the smoke and fire like a phoenix refusing to die. The enemy fire followed, but the helicopter climbed, carrying 350 men out of the canyon and away from death. When they finally reached safety, the silence was overwhelming, not because the danger was gone, but because the Rangers were alive. Their faces were wet with sweat and tears. Their bodies shook, but they were alive, And in the weeks that followed, the story spread like wildfire. A woman had defied orders. A woman had flown into the impossible. A woman had brought them all home. Then, one evening, there was a knock on her door. 350 Rangers stood there, not as soldiers, as people, as survivors, as a family. They didn't come to praise her, they came to thank her, to show her that her courage mattered, that her choice had not been in vain. The young ranger who had been first to climb into the helicopter stepped forward. His voice trembled. "You saved us," he said simply. Mara's eyes filled. She had always believed bravery was something you did without thinking. But now she understood it was something you chose, again and again, even when it hurts, because kindness doesn't vanish. It waits, and it finds its way back. And in the quiet after the storm, Mara looked at the canyon on the horizon and remembered the first message she heard. "We're surrounded," she whispered, as if speaking to those men still inside her heart. "You're not surrounded anymore." If this story moved you, comment where you were watching from, and subscribe to Whispered Words for more true mission stories that remind us what courage really looks like. Because some heroes don't wait for permission, they fly into the fire.